What do you get when a seasoned PC case designer teams up with an iconic PC case manufacturer? What if the case was engineered to ensure both the success of modern hardware through flexible installation options and also the versatility with airflow? That case sounds extremely expensive, and it also sounds abnormally large, right? Well, not if Lian Li Dan cases can help it. This here is the A3 mATX from Lian Li Dan cases. It's a micro form factor PC case built for today with some considerations for tomorrow. And we're about to take a closer look right here, right now on Robeytech. We have built many small form factor PCs over the years, but anytime you go small, there are always a number of concessions you have to make in order for these builds to both function and be successful in the long run. But Lian Li and Dan cases have taken on that task by creating a mini case with lots of options. You're probably familiar with Lian Li at this point. After all, the 0-1 is an incredibly iconic case. But as for Dan cases, you may not be terribly familiar with them. This German-based company was founded by Daniel Hansen in 2015 with his A4 SFX case making waves in the small form factor PC building community. We got our first taste of the Dan A4 case back in February of 2020 with our build that you can actually check out right here. That made us fans, and we were totally into what he was doing. Now we can fast forward to today, and they've had 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns, launched a website, and partnered with Lian Li to manufacture their cases. Not bad. So the A3 mATX is just one more piece to the historic partnership. Now at the time of making this video, the A3 mATX was available in either black or white for $69.99, which, given what they used to cost, that's not too shabby. But at that price, what are we sacrificing, and is this too good to be true? Well, let's dig in. Let's start with a tour around the outside of the case and see what this thing can do. As for its footprint, the A3 mATX is about 17.05 inches or 433 millimeters deep, 7.64 inches or 194 millimeters wide, and 12.66 inches or 321.5 millimeters tall. And that's with the feet on the case. When removed, the A3 is 12.05 inches or 306 millimeters tall. So with its feet on, the A3 is about as long as 2.5 small imperial bananas and as tall as an average footstool. Though, I would not recommend using these as one. It's not very sturdy. As for weight, the A3 mATX weighs 11.13 pounds or 5.05 kilograms, which is about as much as an average American house cat or about 1/10 the weight of an American standard toilet. The A3 mATX, however, is not recommended to use with either cats or in the bathroom. Now, if you look at the overall design, this thing is riddled with holes, but the case seems to be designed to draw air through the sides to feed cold air into your components. We'll see that in just a minute when we talk about how fans are mounted and laid out. Taking one final look at the outside, the case I/O and controls are located on the bottom side of the front panel. The A3 mATX has 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, 1 USB 3.1 Type C port, audio jack for mic line and for headphones, as well as a power button. Pretty standard I/O, but worth talking about. Now let's move inside the case. It's time to answer the big question of what can you actually fit inside of this case? Starting with the motherboard, the A3 mATX supports, as the name implies, micro ATX motherboards. However, we discovered that the A3 could fit a mini ITX motherboard inside just fine. ATX and eATX? Yeah, right. As for GPU support, much like other mini ITX or micro ATX style cases, it all depends on where your power supply is installed and how big it is. Now the A3 mATX does support ATX PSUs up to 140 millimeters, as well as both SFX or SFXL PSUs. These can be mounted in about 6 different positions, 3 on the front, 3 on the side, leaving builders with between 334 millimeters and 415 millimeters for GPU mounting. For context, that's plenty of horizontal space for several high-end GPUs, but you'll want to be very conscious of size here. So you might need to be a little flexible on which brand and model you choose if you have your heart set on something like a 4080 Super. As for vertical space, the A3 mATX does limit supported GPUs to those with a thickness of 61 millimeters or around 3 PCI slots. And if you want to mount fans at the bottom of the A3, you want to heed these dimensions. Now, one quick extra mention here is that the A3 mATX has an adjustable anti-sag bracket that mounts directly to the case. which is actually super handy, but using it does mean sacrificing a slot at the bottom. If you're noticing a pattern here, hang on to that for a little bit later. Speaking of fan support, the A3 mATX has a surprising number of options for a case of this size. Obviously, you can't add all of these at once, but options are the name of the game here. So for fan mounting, the A3 mATX can fit 3 120mm fans at the top, side, and bottom of the case, as well as one 120mm fan in the case rear. Alternatively, it does fit two 140mm fans at the top, side, and bottom should you want to go with bigger fans. As for AIOs or radiators, the A3 has support for radiators up to 360mm or 280mm at the case top, or on the nifty side bracket that sits directly in front of the motherboard. There is also support for either a 240 or 280mm radiator on the case bottom, but you really would be crowding your GPU by going that route. And remember, the pump, and I don't know about putting an AIO down there. If an AIO is not the way you want to go, the A3 supports air coolers with a maximum height limit of 165mm. That's enough space for coolers like your Deepcool AK620 Digital or your Be Quiet Dark Rock 4. But not quite enough space for coolers like your Corsair AA115 or your Cooler Master MA824. Moving on to storage space, there's actually a single mount location that can fit either a 2.5-inch SSD or a 3.5-inch HDD at the bottom of the case, as well as a plate with two mounting locations for 2.5-inch SSDs on the case side. This plate can actually be reoriented from the side to the front, essentially swapping places with the power supply. As for front panel cables and connections, in an act of sheer awesomeness, Lian Li and Dan cases have given us a unified connector for the front panel header, which is awesome. There's also a power cable extension that runs along some really nice cable channels, which we absolutely love to see. Just like we love seeing you around here, so if you wouldn't mind slapping the subscribe button, whipping that like button, and ringing the notification bell, that way you won't miss reviews of PC cases, laptops, AIOs, GPUs, guides, custom PC builds, live streams, giveaways, and dad jokes, and so much more right here on Robeytech. I mean, this is a damn good case. Now, I know we can be a little extra sometimes, but we always try to be extra in the right ways. Speaking of extras, if you wanted to add a vertical GPU bracket or tempered glass side panel, those will be sold separately after launch. At the time of recording this video, we were told the vertical GPU kit would cost $49.99 and the tempered glass panel kit will cost $12.99, which honestly not too bad. So now that we know everything there is to know about the A3 mATX, how would this little bad boy perform in our battery of benchmarks? Now, as we get into these numbers, keep in mind that we are still building our roster of small and micro form factor cases. So we'll have a small comparison for this video, but as we review more and more of them, you should get a better picture in future videos on how the A3 mATX performs against all the other ones. Now remember, these are all different forms and shapes, so it's a little bit weird. Also, here, right now that you're seeing is our spec list for the things that we use when we review our testing for our micro ATX builds, just so you know that we're using the same parts in every build at the same ambient temperature, so we have an apples to apples comparison. We try very hard to fit parts that will fit in all SFF cases, so if things change and we can't compare directly, we will let you know in the video. People, we're all about the science. Okay, with that out of the way, we can talk about performance. While idling, the A3 averaged 32 degrees on the CPU as well as the GPU, though the CPU was a little bit on the warmer side at 32 degrees. For comparison, the Deepcool CH160 was a degree or two cooler on both the CPU and GPU. Under full CPU load, the A3 held CPU temperatures at an average of 88 degrees Celsius. The CH160, on the other hand, averaged 91. While these are still warm temperatures, the A3 mATX showed us that it was still able to keep heat at bay even at such a small size. For our 1440p gaming benchmarks, the A3 mATX averaged 57 degrees on the CPU and 61 on the GPU. What's really interesting here is that both the CH160 and the A3 mATX are nearly identical in their performance. While the CPU averages were the same, the GPU temperatures in the A3 were a degree cooler. Now, it should be worth noting, as much as we love to do comparisons between different small form factor cases, there is a lot more as to why these are so wildly different when it comes to temperature. It is really important to watch each review because there is so much more in terms of fitment and thermals, and getting perspective on why they do what they do is going to be important if you're trying to make comparisons. When we take in all the data, the dimensions, and everything Dan Cases and Lian Li has given us with the A3 mATX, it's time to talk about some considerations if you're looking at building your next mini PC inside of the Dan A3. Thing number one, the A3 is very supportive of multiple fans, GPU sizes, storage, and PSUs. While you can't have it all, you can get a lot out of it if you're smart. If you've built a small form factor PC, you know that just because there's support for something doesn't mean you can absolutely fit everything inside of it. Everything we told you about how many fans can be mounted, the AIOs that can be supported, GPU dimensions, all that is subject to change, depending on a number of factors, including where you mount your PSU, what size motherboard you use, the size of your CPU cooler, the size of your GPU, etc. In our testing configuration, we went really basic. The parts we chose could fit in almost any small form factor build. And even with that kind of minimalistic thinking, we were able to cool a 14700K, which is no small feat. With that in mind, we're confident that you can slap a Ryzen 7 7800X 3D into this configuration as well if you wanted to go back and look at that as something to inspire you. But we didn't leave it there. If we're telling you that you need to think about your parts, so do we. So we did. After some more fussing, reorienting parts and planning and a few more swaps, we found that we could fit a 360mm AIO inside along with 240mm fans. And with that, we were able to supply enough air to this system that we were able to swap out the 14700K for a 14900K. While the A3 is no exception to the rule when you think about small form factor builds, you need to really think about what parts you're going to put in, specifically given the size. This case does an exceptional job of rewarding that investment for your time with builds that can actually really surprise you in terms of performance. It's just going to take more planning than any normal ATX build. Thing number 2, RGB is actually welcome, but you're probably going to want to pass on internal LCD unless you swap out side panels. Because the standard mesh side panel has tiny air holes in it, any internal RGB will provide a really subtle diffused glow. It's kind of nice. You're looking at it right here. While we didn't set out to cram RGB inside, we noticed that our test motherboard had some, and it was nice. Call me Bob Ross, however, this was a happy accident. However, the LCD on the Deepcool AK620 Digital, which is also in our test bench, was not quite as visible. If that's a deal breaker to you, you can always buy the tempered glass that Lian Li sells. However, that means that you're gonna have to remove that whole side fan mount if you're going to want to see the screen unobstructed, which is then going to change thermally how it's going to perform. Fortunately, you have that choice, and if that's what you want to do in your build, then you're absolutely welcome to do it. The primary way this case cools is via those side intake fans that will feed whatever cooler you have, unless you put fans at the bottom, which is also an option. But then again, then you're messing with the GPU thing. Sure, it pulls in air from all of the perforation, etc., but nothing is ever going to fully replace air fed from fans. So you may not be able to fully stretch the leg of this case's capabilities if you move to the tempered glass side panel. While it isn't our first rodeo working together, we hope that this isn't the last for Lian Li and Dan cases, because the A3 mATX is a masterclass in how to build a small form factor PC case. It is absolutely spacious enough to build with ease, it's intelligently engineered, and every bracket and mount feels purposeful and designed with the success of a builder in mind. And because of that, builders have more freedom with their order of operation than they would in an average small or mini form factor case. This case has a ton of potential for builders, and it provides ample opportunities to customize and make a small form factor build that suits your needs. Sure, like every SFF case, there are trade-offs if you decide to move to a tempered glass side panel or choose an air cooler over an AIO, but the awesome thing is that the Dan A3 provides you that choice. Not gonna lie, it's a little big compared to other small form factor cases like the Deepcool CH160, the NR200P, or even the classic Dan cases of old. But I can see that giving a builder a more robust canvas while still limiting footprint is always a good idea. In fact, the Dan A3 will be joining us at Computex as our primary streaming rig, given the flexibility and the size it provides. So if you're looking to build a tiny PC, but you're struggling to choose a case, the A3 mATX from Lian Li and Dan cases checks all the boxes in a big way. So that's it for our review of the A3 mATX by Lian Li and Dan cases. We want to give a huge shout out to both of them for letting us take a look at their micro ATX case. But we want to know what you think about it. Would you say that this is a Dan good case? What do you think about companies collaborating together to design and build cases? Who would you like to see work together? And with the A3 mATX, what was a feature that you most liked, and what kind of build would you put inside of it? Let us know all that down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button with that like button and ring the notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this right here at Robeytech. Also, if you have questions, you want to talk more about this or learn more about it, head over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech. Absolutely amazing place to meet people, to talk about builds, etc. And you know what? You might just make a friend. Also, make sure you follow us on all the other socials at Robeytech, absolutely everywhere. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.